Good afternoon, listeners. This is TLC, Tropical Literature Creatives, the podcast where it is we interview Caribbean authors about themselves and their literary works. I'm your host, Kevin George, and we have with us the dexterous Dexter DeBelotte. Dexter is an author, of course, prison officer, counseling psychologist, trauma and crisis specialist, and also clinical director. And he has authored the book, Work-Related Stress in the T&T Prisons, Stress Among Prison Officers. Dexter, welcome to Tropical Literature Creatives.
Yes, a pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, what we usually do for the guests that we have, we pose to them a scenario. And the scenario is this. Imagine we encounter each other at the airport. I'm coming to Trinidad for the first time. What would you recommend that I do when it is I come to Trinidad? What would you recommend I try, or a place that I would go? Anything at all?
Yeah, I think I would recommend Maracas Beach and the Beacon Shack.
Keeping it simple, keeping it simple. And yeah, keeping it simple. So anyone who comes, just listen. Dexter told you, Maracas and Bacon Shop.
Right.
All right. Well, Dex, out of all the titles that I've called out there, you seem like a pretty accomplished and experienced individual. But I imagine that it wasn't always just so. Can you tell us a little bit about your history, your background?
Yeah, I came from very, very humble beginnings. I grew up in Santa Cruz. I grew up, in a single parent home. My mom, I'm 4 siblings. My father wasn't around. The general thing that we hear coming out of instances where, you grow up under strain. Most of the times, my father wasn't around. He left when I was pretty young. And so I grew up with my mom as a matriarch, the breadwinner of the home and things like that. During the whole process of growing up and, going to primary school and then transferring over to secondary school, things were pretty tough. And one thing I could remember very young, I remember sitting on my couch at home and saying one day I want to be a psychologist, and I would probably sit down and I would look at movies where persons were being counseled and things like that. And I would see myself in that role. I remember, although I wanted to be a psychologist, when I looked at my life at a point in time, things were so tough that a lot of times I said to myself, yeah, but the way how things are, the social status at that point in time, I couldn't see it. So I started to think about, okay, what are some of the ways that I could, accomplish or at least make something of myself? And so I'm going to fast forward straight in. I joined the cadet force pretty young, probably about 12 years old when I joined the cadet force. And I thank God for the cadet force. It really helped give me identity, because during that age, heading into adolescence, there were many distractions. There were many times when you look at choices. Choose to go and smoke weed on the block. You could choose to go and thief. You could choose to go and do so many things. But I chose the cadet force from a very young age. And that kind of kept me in a particular place mentally, not strained, However, I remember the stresses that came growing up with being adolescent youth. You're going to school and school just not working out. In fact, I remember at the time there was a parents' day when the teacher told my mom, take him out of school. Next time learning nothing.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. I was placing like 33rd in tests out of 35 children.
Oh.
And I was doing bad. And the teacher said, take him out of school. He ain't learning nothing. Let him go and learn a trade. And, I asked myself, now I could sit and say, thank God that my mom didn't listen to my teacher. It wasn't that I didn't want to do my schoolwork. And this is one of the things that even now, when I look at where I sit today, I look at it as, hey, sometimes we give up on our youths too quickly.
Yeah.
Because, I was one of these statistics sitting in a classroom, barely making it through. But I wasn't disrespectful. I wasn't giving trouble in school. It was just tough.
Yeah.
I had to do a lot before I reached the school, and I had to do a lot when school was over. And, I hats off to my mom. because even at that point in time when things was tough and she had to go and bring home the bacon, for want of a better term,
Yeah, yeah.
I had to step in as the second of four children and hold the fort for a bit, you know. And the fact of the matter is sometimes we could miss what the children are experiencing, because that was my experience. We could miss the experiences and we could just see the actions, you know. Persons could probably look at my grades then and say, he playing the fool in school. He's a waste of time in school. Just take him out, put him in a trade school and let him go and learn a trade. But and I think that's so important with who I am today, because now I look at, and where I sit as a psychologist, you hear persons giving up, using words that sounds like they're giving up on their children educationally. And I could look in and say, no, don't give up. Because I know what it's like to be in that position, and it helps, you know. So fast tracking, because if we have to move forward, you know, going through the whole process of secondary school, I remember reaching in Form 4.
Yeah, yeah.
And heading into Form 5. And I remember, I think it was when my brother left school. He didn't leave with too much of a good report.
Okay.
After writing CXC, and I pinched myself that time. I said, nah, I can't leave school with no passes and thing. I have to leave school with something.
Yeah.
And we started to look around thinking, okay, which service could benefit me? You know, as a young man leaving school, wanting to be a counseling psychologist, I needed to find something that I could have a starting point at. And I chose, well, everybody gravitates to the government services, national security. Everybody thinks, well, you know, it's a permanent job and, you know, you have some level of job security. So I looked around. I was in the cadet force. I was offered, you know, an opportunity. Say, hey, why you don't join the army and the cadet force for so long? You know how the ropes are. And I didn't want to be a soldier. And, you know, persons often laugh at that or say, you know, why you didn't want to be a soldier? I was already in the cadet force and that kind of thing. And I said, I didn't like the level of what the army was for me. I just didn't feel that connection after being in the cadet force for so many years. And so I looked at the services and I chose the prison. One, because the prison, at that point in time, I know it was 3 passes to qualify. And when I looked at my subjects that I had to write, I realized that if I have to pass any subjects, it's going to be 3. I know I could make the 6.
It's not that if you rationalize and you make
Yes.
decisions and see the lay and make and decide how to proceed. Yeah.
Correct. So I look in and I see it. I say, you know what? I can't pass these other subjects. I think I could do 3. And I looked at that and I settled and say, you know what? I'm going to go after principle of business. I'm going to go after human and social biology. I'm going to go after English. And I'm going to get those 3 subjects. And I had probably about 2 terms remaining, if so much. And I did my SBAs. I did pretty well. And I passed the 3 subjects.
Yeah.
And you know, when I walked into that school that day, I know a lot of persons could identify with picking up that slip. I was frightened. I was like wondering what is going to be written on this paper. And when I opened it and saw the 3 passes, I pinched myself again. I have a habit of pinching myself sometimes just to make sure that this is really happening. If I thought to myself, if I this in 6 months after going to school for 5 years and I could achieve 3 passes in 6 months of getting serious, what can't I do?
Look at that. Yeah.
And that was my turning point, really. That was my turning point. I started to go after the things that I wanted really, really, really seriously. But I must backtrack a bit because there's another part of it. I remember being 14 years old and the struggles of adolescent life really jumped in at me then.
Yeah.
And, I decided one day to take my life. With all the frustrations and the stresses that I was faced with at that point in time. And a lot of youths today, you know, they come into my office and they talk about, you know, I want to take my life. I want to die. Some even attempted it a few times. And so I'm standing on my rooftop at 14 years old, looking for a spot to jump off, that when I jump, I'm sure I will die. And it's like I'm hearing a voice in my head saying, jump, kill yourself. Life ain't worth it. Nobody don't love you. They don't care about you. And I'm there for a while. And then out of the blue, I hear a voice say, don't jump, you know, don't jump. There's more to life. And I heard on that rooftop, be the change you seek. And if you know me well enough, in every one of my books, I always write that there. Be the change you seek, as knowledge without God's purpose is meaningless. It's because that exemplifies exactly what I've been through. And in my quest to the point that I'm in here now by the grace of God, I see where I am only here because when I made the decision to be the change that I was looking for, and two, understanding that, be the change you seek as knowledge, because we go after knowledge. My thought was, hey, knowledge, the key out of poverty is education. And I went after that.
Yeah, yeah.
But knowledge without true purpose, godly purpose, is meaningless. And that is what really solidified my structure here. So fast forward, I left school, I joined the prison service, I got through.
Yeah.
But again, the story, Kevin, is so wide that I have to keep rewinding when I remember that there's a point in here that I must say, So I left school. I think I had joined MTS security. I was working MTS for a while as a security officer.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, I'd applied to the prison, waiting for them to call me. It took about 3 years in the process. And I remember one time being home, and I went down to the river to relax with some of my partners. And I'm waiting for the prison service to call, So, yeah. There's a posture when you're waiting, especially when the services have you waiting. You have to remain fit. You have to remain healthy. You have to remain in contact. So you must have a phone ready and waiting and things like that. And you're ready yourself.
Yeah.
But I'm at the river lining with my friends. Who knows, by the way, who knows that I've applied to a service and I'm waiting to be accepted. And they light up a spliff, light up a joint, marijuana, and they start smoking and passing it around. And I'm standing in the circle there, and my turn comes. And I mean, the first time I allow it to pass, so fellas, all I do really smoke. But it went around and it came back to me again. And I said, all I do smoke marijuana, I do smoke cigarettes, I do smoke, And they started to take turns, ridiculing and picking, telling me all sorts of things. But we're playing, you feel better than we. Where's a smoke, where's a pull, and all these things. And I always like to remind persons to be careful of the one pull experience. And it's something that I've called it that because when we look at it in life, the one pull experience, yours may not be mine. Yours may not even be a pull. It may be that ride that your friends tell you, let me go on, that it turned out to be a robbery. It may be that decision you choose to make that change your life. And when I look at that, sitting by that river that day and being handed the marijuana, there are times when I thought to myself, just take the smoke and done and forget the mess. But something in me wouldn't allow me to take that pull that day. I could only assign it to God. I could only say that was God. Because I told them, I say, you know what? Well, they can't be my friends and forcing me to take a pull. So I left the river, I went home. I take the long way home. Now, if you know, growing up in Santa Cruz, it have one main way in many of the places that we live, and then there's always a track or a little side place where you could run up and reach home. I chose the long way home that day. And walking home, and I was really angry because I'm saying, these is your friends, boy. These is the people you're lining with, and fellas, and them, look how they're treating you because you just don't smoke. And, when I got home that day, as soon as I walk inside, the phone ring, and who it was on the next end, the prison service calling, telling me you've been accepted and they want me to come in to do a medical. And the guy say, I hope you're not smoking no weed, because if you have to do a drug test,
Wow.
And that's why I call it the one pull experience, because if I had taken that pull that day, I may not even be here talking to you right now. I may not even have written a book. I may not have had the experiences I've had, or even been able to fund my education to the extent that I was able to. And so the fact of the matter is that, as you ask me one question, and when you talk about tell us about yourself, the fact of the matter is I am an example of all the things that I've been through.
Yeah.
And some of the things that I've been through, I thank God that I was able to, by his grace, defend or wiggle my way through some turbulent times. And sometimes you're in turbulent waters and you don't know. Because I just thought I was by the river refusing to smoke a marijuana. Almost 20 years of experience after, I could look in and say, that was almost an attempt to railroad my entire purpose and life as an officer.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so when I joined the prison service, you know, I was motivated to go back to school and get 5 other passes, no, 2 other passes to make the 5 necessary to qualify for mainly anything. The foundation of education in this country, and I probably in the region, appears to be 5 CXC passes. At least for the most part, you want to at least have that 5 CXC passes to qualify to even go further in anything. And so I went after maths. Well, we all know how a lot of us have struggled with maths. And I chose another subject. I think it was social studies. I did evening classes or continuation classes as an officer to do it.
Yes.
And although I am an officer and was an officer at a point in time, I remember not feeling like this is the end of the road for me. Like, okay, persons would say, well, you have a fairly all right job. And, you know, at least you're getting a salary at the end of every month and, you know, it's permanent. But for me, it wasn't the cash. You see, sometimes we see purpose as money, but when you find true purpose, the money don't matter. And where I wasn't feeling like I was fulfilling the purpose for which I was created. That's why I realized, no, you want to be a counseling psychologist. And so in order to do that, you need to get your 5 passes and you need to qualify yourself to be able to go into tertiary education. And, you know, sometimes your biggest pitfall or your biggest demotivator could be yourself. Because even when I got the other passes and I went into the Caribbean Nazarene College and I applied and I got through to start studying and things like that, I remember coming home one day and hearing, you know, sometimes that voice in your head that is trying to convince you otherwise, saying, we going up there to play you studying for some tertiary education bachelors. You playing, you could do bachelors or whatever. You could have barely make it through school. And sometimes our mind could play tricks on us, or sometimes, you know, I remember hearing that, hearing things like, you can't make it in that school. Look how you barely scrape it through secondary school. Then sometimes we need to be careful of the circles that we're in.
Yeah.
Because sometimes your biggest demotivator comes from your closest circles. As I could remember even mentioning to some of my friends, and some of them laugh, like, Dexter, you feel you could go and do some bachelors, is that enough for you? You know? And one thing I believe I learned very young in my life was the art of eustress, turning bad stress into good stress. When things come up and you know, the aspect of resilience is so important. And I think that's something that even our youths today lack a lot of resilience, being able to bounce back when things happen. And I remember many times when things didn't work out as it should. Things didn't work out how I thought it would work out. Like the first time I got my results from CNC, the first semester, you know, I'm doing a particular course and I'm thinking, well, I'm doing so well. And I'm waiting for final grades to come in for one particular course that I was doing at the point in time, and I'm not getting the grade. The new term started and I still didn't get the grade. And I'm like, why am I not getting this grade? And I am asking the lecturer, and the lecturer tell me, well, it ain't ready yet. And I'm so normal. When I saw the results and I saw the papers and the lecturer write up on the paper, not at this level, and this is unacceptable. And I was crushed. You know, and then, you know, that voice, that demotivation that we hear sometimes is like, see, I tell you, just leave, forget about it. This is not for you. And instead of taking the comments that were made and saying, well, give up, throw in the towel, I turned it into eustress. I say, okay, I will show you that I could do this. I will show you that I'm supposed to be here. I will show you that I could get this bachelor's. And if me, who used to come almost last in tests, and teachers say, he could amount to nothing, take him out of school and go and learn a trade, could do it, then it will be a very good example for persons who, like me, especially our young men, sometimes our young men are not studying, our young men are giving up. Often I hear in my office, parents agreeing to let the children drop out of school. He will go and learn a trade, and I always ask the question, when the child who can't read and write drops out of school to go and learn a trade, how could they do the trade if they can't check, can't read and write, can't do a mathematical computation? How? And you see, it's so important for us to see the importance of education as a foundational platform for even the trade.
Yes, yes.
Because a lot of our youths could do the same trade after, but they need an educational foundation. And I think that is one of the biggest things there. So let me fast track a bit. Moving on, I started hitting the dean's list after that semester.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to encourage persons to don't give up, even when you get a little bad result, even when you get even when you go through a little rough waters, even if the grades don't look like how you would have liked it to look, don't give up. Because after that first semester, I graduated there was not a semester I wasn't on the dean's list.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to myself, so much scholars coming to this place and so much of this coming to this place. Who is me? And sometimes you never know your true potential until you challenge yourself and unlock it. And I thank God that I was able to unlock my potential. I graduated from Caribbean Nazarene College. And when I graduated, the day I graduated, I looked at graduation and I didn't feel accomplished because I knew that this was just part of the journey for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so immediately after, I started to look for places to do my master's program, because in order to practice fully, you need a master's. And so I went right back, after looking around, I went back to the Caribbean Nazarene College and I pursued counseling, emphasis in trauma and crisis intervention. And, that in itself really, when you start to recognize that you're on the road to the purpose that you believe you was created for,
Mm-hmm.
there's an energy that comes when times get low, when the frustration comes with the work, because it's not an easy task to work in a government service and study. And so the question is, what's your motivation when the chips are down, when the pressure is on?
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing if you're just doing something to be paid for it. But if you believe that what you're doing is part of your God-given purpose, because that was my strength. When the chips was low and things was hard, when it was a fight, I would look in and see, this is for me, this is what I want to do. And I would find the strength in purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I would find the current or the energy, to the electricity or the motivation to move on, because this is what I want to do. This is what I was created for. And, so I went in, I completed my master's, and let's discuss the book, Work-Related Stress in T&T Prisons.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Because
So,
Dexter, to be honest, I thought that, what you was talking about was a book, Dexter, because it sounds so interesting. I got wrapped in it. A book
who
now.
knows? Maybe I need to write my biography.
When you do it, we'll interview you again.
Yes. So the book. I remember while I was doing my bachelor's at CNC, I was wondering what to do my thesis on. And being an officer, I looked at what was the issues that we experience. And I thought about the whole aspect of work-related stress, because I was going through it firsthand. When we look at international statistics, the life expectancy of corrections officers in foreign first world countries is 59 years. And that intrigued me, because if in a foreign first world country, the life expectancy or the average mortality rate of a corrections officer, which is basically the same word, the equivalent to a prisons officer, is 59 years, I wondered, how long would I live? Because I'm in a third world developing country. functioning in a system that is much different, far different, vastly different from that of the first world counterparts who experience things like post-traumatic stress disorder, even at a higher rate than soldiers coming back from Iraq. So that really intrigued me. And I was saying to myself, all the things that I was going through, it's no secret at that point in time, prisons officers has always been under threat. Lives have always been under threat. The media, the print media would show time and time again officers being murdered.
Yes.
You know,
I remember in your book you actually gave like accounts, like names, dates, times.
yes.
It's very detailed. So in case
Correct.
you go through the book, spoiler for not no spoilers, but person buy the book to the specifics. So continue, Dexter.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, I myself had my own run-ins and I put it in the book as well, where, you know, I had my own experiences with death threats being an officer. And, you know, I looked at it and thought to myself, what better place to discuss or to speak about work-related stress than the prison service, the system that I work in, which is risky, which was a risk because, you know, in many cases, persons wouldn't do that because, you know, you're doing a research as an officer is one thing compared to doing a research as a civilian.
Yeah. But I guess it kind of gives you an edge because you're inside, so you get a different point of view than the guy on the outside.
Exactly. And, you know, I looked at even my family life at that point in time as a married young man, issues in marriage, familial issues, issues with work, issues with shift work, issues with death threats, issues with health. All these things come together to add, you know, what work stress is. And one of the things that really stood out to me, and I make sure I put it at the back of the book, you know, was a statement made by Brodsky 92. And he said that, you know, any organization or social structure which consists of one group kept inside who do not want to be there and the other group who are there to make sure they stay in will be an organization under stress. And that really held me when I read it the first time because that exemplifies what the prison is. We are there to make sure a population that don't want to be there stay in. And so I went after that research and, you know, the findings was mind-blowing.
Yes.
When I recognized that, you know, the whole aspect of dying by age 59 was so real due to, you know, and I put it in the book as well, I spoke concerning the health issues, which is one of my, and remains one of my major concerns, not just for prisons officers, for frontline workers, for members of national security, for nurses, doctors, for shift work, for persons working shift, because anybody who works at a place where they respond to an alarm or some emergency also fall heavily at risk for developing cardiovascular diseases and things like that. And although I'm not a medical doctor, literature, the research shows and screamingly points to it. And when I looked at the findings of a particular question, and I want to bring it out here one time, you know, a particular question I asked in my book, and if you have my book already, I think it is on page, let me give you the page number so that you could, it's on page 121, question 16. And Kevin, you know, I asked a question, have you been diagnosed with any of the following stress-related medical conditions after joining the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service? This question changed my whole outlook on what I wanted to do. Why? Because initially you do a thesis, the aim is to get your grades, do a pamphlet or do some flyer and hand it out and call a judge and get your points. But my research turned out to be much more than what was asked of me at that level.
Yes.
I set out to do a complete and full quantitative research, and I utilized a sample population of 327 officers, which at the point in time was way over 10% of the sample population of officers in Trinidad and Tobago. So the findings of this research is very valid. And, you know, out of the 327 officers, 389 responses I got. It meant that some persons were diagnosed with more than one. High blood pressure 65, eating disorders 95, migraines 42, 24 were alcoholics, and 3 were persons who were suffering from either peptic ulcers or acid reflux. And, you know, all of these are signs and symptoms of cardiovascular diseases. And that stood out because I'm saying that, well, if this is the facts here with a little over 12% of the prison officer population, then we may have something on our hands here that may be a grave issue. And so I said to myself, I'm going to do the research. I'm going to show off the research, but it cannot stay in the form of just a document that goes in a drawer and just become lost.
Yeah.
All right. And so I set out from then to publish as a book.
So the idea took form.
Yeah. But, you know, when we write as academics, we write in a different format. So I had to now restructure everything that I had written for my thesis in a way where persons would want to read it, and 2 would understand what was written. And so that took me a while. In fact, like many other persons listening to this, may have a book in a drawer on your desktop, you know, or maybe on your Google Drive, just sitting there waiting for you to complete it. And this book stayed on my desktop for quite a while. And it was only during COVID-19, during the pandemic. I remember I think it was the beginning of March 2020.
Yes.
I just got up. I was sleeping one night and I just heard, like, you know, it's like the Holy Spirit saying, you need to publish your book. I hadn't looked at this document for years. I hadn't looked at the document for years. I just had it in a place and it was just there. It was there. I had done a lot of work on it. It really just had some minor things to look over and things like that. But it was just there. And, you know, it's a perfect time to speak about perfect timing. Sometimes the timing is not set by us. I mean, for the persons who have a belief system like me, if you find out talking too much about God, I'm a pastor. And so as a pastor, I can't help it. And I love Jesus. And he is the reason for everything that I do. My purpose comes from God. And so I can't help it. But it's very important to understand seasons. And although I had written this book, and although it was there sitting, the season had not yet come to publish. And when I heard that you need to publish your book, I got up and I got the energy, I got the drive. I didn't need coffee, Kevin. I was up all hours of the night with just this energy and to just complete. And I went after it. I would go to work, and while I'm on work, I just can't wait to reach home to continue writing. You know, and I completed the first final draft by the ending of March 2020.
Sorry to cut you across. You said it's fine. 2020, but maybe it might be something that you might mention a bit later on. But I was just curious. I mean, how long did it take you to put together the book from? Because, well, you mentioned, like, you know, the idea coming together, and in terms of the fully published book. But you could answer now, or you could continue with the story.
I could answer now, because when I finished my thesis, and I just looked at the possibility of what I would call the book, and I took it out of the thesis format and I placed it into the book format, and I left it there for years. So basically, I didn't do anything to the book really. When I started back at it to actually publish, it was the beginning of March 2020. It took me 1 month. To transfigure the entire document. I mean, I'm talking about sleepless, energetic nights here. And when I completed my first draft by the ending of March, within a month, you know, I had some persons read it through and things like that. And I utilized the self-publishing tool that Amazon has. And it meant that everything from cover to cover on this book, I did it. By the grace of God, because I had never done it before. I designed the cover. I did everything. And for the things that I couldn't do, I looked at videos on YouTube. I looked at any online video, anything like that that could help me to gain a greater understanding of what was required. From bleeding the entire book to every single thing, I did it. I thank God that when I completed the cover, the inspiration to complete the cover and all these things were, I think it was, for me, I would say it was divinely placed, because I couldn't do these things just like that, I couldn't do these things just like that. But when I completed the first draft from cover to cover, and I had the cover completed, and I had the document in itself, in its first raw format, it took me 13 days after sending it around to some of my close colleagues to have it read, proofread, to find issues. And I was like, listen, do not go easy. Do not think that, okay, this is Dexter document, so I want to go easy on him. I say, read this document and come as if you are a book critic. Yes. Anything you don't understand, anything that is not clear, anything that I didn't make clear enough, call me, ask me, answer, demand an answer from me. And I put myself to that standard so that I would ensure that there's quality, because I'm doing this on my own, and I'm not that I'm any expert at that point in time, any real expert in writing books. This is my first book. And I want that to be an encouragement as well for persons who say, I can't write a book because I am not that academic, or I don't have these skills. Come on, in this age, and this technological age, this electronic age, anything you need to know, you could learn. Like me, I learned everything that I needed to learn. I learned on YouTube, I could tell you. And there are other platforms now that we could gain greater access to. And there are new apps coming up now that could even assist authors in writing and in proofreading and things like that. And so that really is how the book came. And on the 13th of April, at probably about 2 a.m. or somewhere around there, I was putting the final touches on Amazon Kindle and Amazon KDP to click that publish button. And sometimes even when you're so close to the finish line, you could have so many obstacles. Yeah. Because although the book was finished, to meet the standard for them to accept your book, although you reach the point where you finish the literature and all the words are correct, every time you upload, sometimes they send back. They say, no, you need to do this. You need to do that. This not meeting. And there would be an automated list of things that you would have to fix before you submit again. And sometimes it could be frustrating when you see in the end of the finish line, and it's like you keep getting rejected. And I want to tell persons as well, don't give up and don't sell yourself short either, because sometimes we could just get fed up and say, leave it so, send it like that. I had enough, leave it so. But I want to encourage persons to, although it might be the road might be narrow and it might be a little more bumpy, it might be a little more rough, stick at it, stick with it, and fight it through. And so, Kevin, we haven't get to the contents of this book really, we now reach the cover.
No, Dexter, you wouldn't believe. I mean, most of the questions that I've had, you've pretty much been answering them as we go along, But but that's fine. That's fine. But seeing that you brought up the contents in the book, you could tell us brief one, a little bit about the book itself, and also who is the audience who is the book geared towards? Because we had a conversation before, and let me let you answer that question.
Yeah, indeed. Hats off to prisons officers. Hats off to prison officers. As a prison officer with almost 20 years experience, I can look in and I can call. In fact, I put places and I spoke about it in the book where how it really feels to be a member of the prison service, working and outside in the public. I've written about, and when you read the book, to the persons looking at this video, you would read it for yourself, instances when persons would have looked at me in the public and called me barbaric and wicked, all you're so wicked, and all the officers wicked, and look what you're doing, the poor prisoner, and all these things. And when we look at what prisons officers do and what we endure on a daily basis, we keep society safe. And we keep society safe by holding the persons that generally the public don't want to be around. So we protect society. And most persons wouldn't want to go in a jail or prison, and we go there every day, despite what prisons officers are in a prison 24/7, 7 days a week. There is not a time when an entire prison is unmanned. It's a round the clock job. It's a selfless job. And I wrote about it as well. I wrote about it in my dedication. When you open the book, you would see this book dedicated firstly to prisons officers, And what I want to say though is, although I dedicate this book to prisons officers, it is not only for prisons officers. Why? The issues that I spoke about and written about and researched about stretches way beyond the walls of the prison. In fact, police officers, fire officers, soldiers, coast guards, all fall victim to the very same issues related to work stress. And maybe a bit of variance in your duty to my duty, or in relation to police, to fire, and all these things. But the frontline workers generally, what do we have? We have high instances of familial issues, high instances of divorce and separation, high instances of negative coping, the use of alcohol and drug use and gambling and other addictions, not to mention overwork as a form of negative coping as well. What do we have in common? We have stress in common. Your stress mightn't be my stress, but your stress is just as stressful as my stress in some cases. And the fact of the matter is, no matter what it may look like to you, the facts are that work stress affects all of us. And some of us, like prisons officers, for example, we endure not only work stress, we also endure trauma. We also endure psychological issues that are largely linked. The foreign research speaks for itself. And so when we think about who this book was written for, don't see the cover and think, that is just for prisons officers. Work-related stress in T&T Prisons. T&T Prisons is the population of one of the most stressful jobs in Trinidad and Tobago, the region, and even the world. Because even when we look at per capita research in relation to murders of officers, prisons officers, nowhere in the world we may share these statistics concerning the amount of prisons officers who would have been murdered over the years. And it's well over 25 officers. And so I took this population because it is one of the major populations of officers who endure work-related stress. So if we want an example of what work-related stress looks like in an organization, that's where the T&T Prisons comes in. But don't mix it up. When we look in our hospitals, our nurses, doctors, and sometimes we miss certain jobs as well. Security officers, ambulance drivers, paramedics, the undertakers. Do we pay particular attention to how stressful some of these jobs are? And sometimes we could just see things on the surface, but when we look deeper, we could see how work-related stress could affect the garbage man, who while you sleeping, he up 3 o'clock in the morning, rain, snow, or storm, picking up your garbage. And so, yeah, and so it's so important for us to see that. So when we look at the title, Work-Related Stress in T&T Prisons, is really to highlight that, hey, pay attention to this population and ensure that you do as much as possible to safeguard yourself from falling into these things that are taking place. And, that's to answer your question, Kevin, in relation to, who this book is for everybody. Everybody, the school teacher, the child, in fact, her spouses. A lot of our service, be it male or female officers, their spouse rarely know what goes on. Sometimes as a form of protection, the officers will never say, babes, I almost died, The officers would hardly ever say, if you put yourself in the shoes of a fire officer who just cut a 5-year-old out of a vehicle and the 5-year-old was dead and comes home now and opens his door to kiss his 5-year-old and then goes into the bed and lie down. Wife says, "You all right?" And he says, "Yeah, because how could I tell you that I just cut a 5-year-old out of a vehicle dead?" And so it points to how important it is for help as well. You know, and all of these things are highlighted in the book. This book is less written as a storybook, but is more as a text. It's actually a text. I recommended it as a text for, you know, recruits coming into the prison service. Recruits going into the police service could read this book and gain an understanding of what stress is really like. Criminologists could read this book and gain an understanding of what it means to be within and work within the prison system as an officer, through the eyes of an officer, and through the eyes of an inmate, and through the eyes of the family members who have to contend with you coming home, fighting and battling to deal with your stress and thinking that the home is still the jail, or the home is still the police station, or the home is still the barracks, or the home is still the fire station, and so on and so forth. And so when things happen and persons struggle now to address this stress, it comes out in different ways. And so the whole aspect of the book now identifies the organizational sources of work stress. It identifies the fact that poor compensation and what it does within organizations in relation to stress. We see the other day where we were clamoring for the 4%, and 4% was the issue, for example. And we talk about what poor compensation does. The book highlights the whole aspect of death threats, violence, and manipulation, you know, speaks about shift work and overtime. You know, it goes in depth into the whole aspect of the hardened heart. And Kevin, I could talk about this and put it in here as well. I remember a time when you may ask, well, where's the hardened heart? Let me wet your lips a little bit concerning the hardened heart. The fact of the matter is that, you know, after you work in a place for extended amount of time and undergoing large amounts of stress, you tend to sometimes lose feeling. So in order to safeguard yourself, sometimes we lose the love and the heart or the emotions associated with the job. And so I wrote about it so I could say it openly, you know. I remember times when I would be in the prison and somebody would come in, you know, ever so often you will get that one person who don't understand how they reach in prison, you know, and they would be crying and all these things. And I'd be totally unmoved, unfazed, unshifted, like, hello, so what? You know, things could happen in the environment. Somebody could die, somebody commit suicide, and you're just cool.
That's when you get to that stage, I don't know what to say, man.
Exactly. But no, when we look at the psychological aspect of it, it's so real because, I mean, that happened to me. I needed counseling. I went to counseling and I dealt with it and I found back my emotions. I softened my heart. But let's take the prison out of the microscope and let's look at our country. Let's look at Trinidad and Tobago, for example. All of us could attest to meeting that one police officer who really wasn't in a good mood that morning. A lot of us could attest to going into the hospital and meeting up with that one nurse or that one doctor who really didn't appear to have a heart, or that one clerk in a government office who really didn't have time with you, who speaks you off. And so what I'm saying is that the hardened heart is a place that persons could end up if we're not careful, when we start losing our humanity, when we start losing our emotions, when we start losing that humanistic connection to people, and we start to see the job for just the job. We don't feel anymore. I come and I stick here, put a needle in your hand and it hurting, and I'm telling you, like, stay still. And I don't care if it hurts, or at least I don't show it. And I think that's one of the things that we need to be so careful of, because once you develop a hardened heart, you're not only affecting the people you interact with, but you're also affecting yourself. Your family is affected as well, because sometimes that type of condition, it goes home with you. So no matter how much you tell yourself, well, look, I will leave the work home. I will leave the work and go home. A hardened heart follows you. And your wife notices that you change. Your children notices that you change. When you come home, everybody scatter. Nobody wants to communicate with you. Nobody wants to be around you. You know, I've spoken about the health risks associated, the poor public image, which is something that is so big. I mean, you could look around Trinidad and Tobago. How often do you see a prisons officer in uniform? You see police in uniform. You see fire officers. You see all other members of national security. You would hardly see an officer who is not on active duty in uniform. And why is that? And it points to the level of stress. When you ask yourself the question, how come? How come I can't put on my uniform and walk the nation's roadways normal? How come? And so it screams when we look at the whole aspect of the psychological issues. Could you imagine when we talk about work stress, what it means to wear a uniform that is not necessarily something that is accepted? Anybody, you always have to be looking over your shoulder to make sure that you're safe. So you wouldn't wear the uniform because it's like you're a target. And so these are some of the things that I would have written about.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the whole aspect of counseling, understanding how to get help, seek help. A lot of the times in our services are male dominated. But a lot of the times as men, we don't want to ask for help. We have the Superman complex, the machismo in us that I good. And I've had time and time again, you ask persons, you all right? And they tell you, yeah, I good. Yeah, I good. And they sit by themselves and cry. They have suicidal ideations by themselves. They contemplate getting an accident driving home, mash right on the gas and go into a pole, because if I kill myself normal, I will breach the insurance. If I take my life in an accident, then my family could benefit. And just being real here, because when we look at the whole aspect of work-related stress, sometimes I think we just take it too lightly and feel it's just a run-of-the-mill, it's just a surface thing, but it's not. We have men and women serving men and women in our services who may be on the verge, completely stressed out. I mean, think about it. I asked myself a question the other day.
Mm-hmm.
If all the members of a service, any government service or whatever the case is, had an opportunity to gain a better salary in a different place, how much will take it? And the whole aspect of motivation and loving what you do comes in there, because it begs the question, why am I here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? If I'm here for the salary, that's a sad thing. Because if all I'm here for is the salary, the day I get something better, I go on. And so how do we protect our servicemen? How do we frontline workers, our servicemen, our servicewomen, our nurses, our doctors, how do we protect them? Our frontline workers, how do we protect the people who look after us? How do we protect mental health? That's what this book is geared towards. Starting the conversation, hitting on some valid pointers in what is necessary to do to safeguard your marriage. Simple as if we were to do a research within the services, the frontline workers, within the divorce rate, it's pretty high. The separation rate, pretty high. And so this book uncovers some things, and it opens a can of worms as well.
Yeah. Now
we're going to bury our head in the sand. This exists and it's taking place. And what are we going to do about it is more important. I always emphasize the importance of the Employee Assistance Program, which offers mandatory counseling under the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Any nation should employ that. Even our brothers and sisters up the islands should pay particular attention to that. The importance of taking care of the people who take care of us. Because God forbid there's a national emergency. If we have people who are charged with the responsibility to take care of us, and we don't know for sure their mental state, how can they truly take care of us? And so sometimes we could put mental health in the back burner because, you don't see mental health issues that much.
Yeah.
Female officers will beat their face as they say, they put on the makeup and they come. Male officers, no matter where from, police, fire, prison, wherever, in the hospital, wherever, nurses, whatever. You put on your face, your Monday face, your Tuesday face, your Wednesday face, and so on, and you come. You smile and everybody think you're okay. And then you go home and you take your life, or you go home and you take your spouse's life, you go home and take your children's life. God forbid, these things are real things that could happen, and in some cases have. And so, Kevin, it talks about how important it is to pay attention to the mental health of our citizens. And it brings me to the whole aspect of what is my role in all of this. I have a role as an officer, and so too all of us listening to this. Even if you're not in a service, you could be working in a grocery. We all have a responsibility to take care of our mental health, to reach out and ask for help if we need it. If we're struggling, to ask, to say something. We have a responsibility to take care of our own physical health, our biological health as well. And sometimes we don't. A lot of the times we don't. And I am guilty of that at times. I eat when I want, eat all kind of thing that I shouldn't be eating. We don't exercise as we should. We don't stimulate our minds as we should. We engage in practices that is not necessarily healthy for us or our family or even the job. Some persons are so frustrated that they have a drink to come to work and then they need a drink to go home because both environments are hostile. How do I encourage persons to read a document that could save lives? That's what this book does. I've had wives call me and say, thanks for writing this book. I have wives who would have apologized to their husbands because they never understood what it meant to work on the front line. And husbands and officers who would have been in the position where they've been trying for years to explain it and didn't know how. Work-related stress in T&T Prisons does that. And these are some real-life testimonies, and there are roles for us, and then there are roles that the government has to play as well. There are roles that the organizations have to play. And, this is not a call really for persons to see, to say, well, it's a fight and a pull and a tug. And I'm not trying to waste down any organization or institution or belittle anybody in any way. I'm speaking here as a counseling psychologist and trauma and crisis specialist. I'm speaking from the position of having gone through some of these things as an officer, going through divorce, having gone through divorce. And all of these things, if we are not careful, it could happen to anybody. And it is also a call to say, hey, don't go down the road that I would have had to go down, else the book would be in vain. It's so that you don't have to go through what I went through. But so many of us face now, seek help, give me a call. It don't matter which country you're from. It don't matter where you are here in this, give me a call. I will make sure my number is available. Call me, call my organization and get the help. So,
well, in fact, when it comes to your contact information, when the time comes for this episode, it would also be provided so persons who are viewing, they will be able to see it as well.
And so I want to encourage persons to, Kevin, the writers out there, the researchers out there. I aim for to help increase and beef up the culturally specific evidence-based research in the region. Even as a person in academics, too often we write about foreign statistics. Too often we write about things that happen over the world, which is good. But when we come to bring it home, we have little to no statistics, real statistics. Bring it home. And we're struggling to find stats. And this is my contribution as well to the whole aspect of evidence-based, culturally specific research. And this book is, I can probably say openly, that is the first of its kind in the region. I don't think you could go into any other country and find a book like Work-Related Stress in T&T Prison that speaks to and gives evidence-based quantitative data relating to issues with officers. So I want to encourage persons as well to write, to study, to research, choose topics that would benefit not just your country, but could benefit the region as a whole. Choose topics that could benefit the world. Who knows? And those projects that you have, those projects you have, those books you have on your desktop, those books you have written down in scrap paper, in a drawer somewhere, take them out. You never know. Like Work-Related Stress in T&T Prison, it was sitting on a desktop for years. On the right timing, the right moment, the Kairos moment came. And you never know, maybe this is your moment to dust it off and publish. So I think I said a mouthful already, Kevin.
Again. So like I said, I had a list of questions, and believe it or not, we've answered pretty much all the questions that I would have had written down here to ask you. Which brings me to, but I did at least have one last question for you. What's next, Dexter? I mean, you've spoken about a lot, you've experienced a lot, you've accomplished a lot. What's next for you, Dexter DeBelotte?
Lovely, lovely question. I took the opportunity to do added research. I would have researched the whole aspect of vicarious trauma among frontline workers. And so I'm currently working on another book. I wouldn't release the name just yet. Okay. But I'm currently working on another book in relation.
Not the autobiography as yet.
No, not yet, not yet.
Okay, all right.
Right, so I'm working on that. I'm also working on another project where I'm spreading my wings a bit as an author, and I'm writing a book for fathers. And maybe we would meet one day and talk about that particular book.
Once
That.
once it's published, let us know, and
Yeah.
we'll meet up and we'll get something happening.
Yeah, a sneak peek at that book is it really pays attention to what fatherhood truly means and through the Caribbean eyes from a spiritual base as well, from a kingdom base, from a godly base to help men to understand what our role and fathers are. It would be a book that is geared towards helping young men understand what they are being trained to become. So in the process of becoming as young males, they would have basically a manual giving them information as to, okay, this is what I need to look at. I need to develop these skills. I need to develop these tools. A good father does that. A good father does these things. So these are some of the things. There's a project I'm working on very, very feverishly, and I'm hoping that I could publish probably by the end of the year, or at least early next year, please God, for the latest. So that's some of the things that I'm up to. I continue to have a lot of workshops, a lot of trainings, as well as counseling, individual counseling. I do a lot of training in relation to work stress. I do a lot of trainings for work stress. I do a lot of trainings for companies and things like that as well. So Kevin, it's just a lot. It's a lot. And when it comes to the aspect of ministry as well, I do a lot of programs. I recently launched a program called Youth Matters, right, where we meet and we discuss with youths every Saturday evening from 6 p.m. So I'm all about the youths as well. My wife is really the host of that program. I'm the co-host on that show. And it really is some of the things that it falls under my ministry, Destiny Shalom Outreach Ministries, who led by Apostle Dr. Shirley Almond London. And, those are some of the things that I engage in because we need to get to the youths. And again, it comes from the place where I know the road I've walked. And I know that there are so many young men out there who may not have had the whole aspect of, the bounce back, being able to create the stress in the situation. And a lot of men, young men, youths just need the guidance to say, keep coming, keep moving forward, be the change you seek. It's okay, and I think that level of encouragement is what's necessary, not only for our young men, but for our young women as well. And, it really aims to help fathers to step up and mothers to step up as well with fathers. And so I think that kind of sums it up.
Oh, well, that's good, man. That's good. Well, we wish you all the best on your undertakings because it really sounds mostly interesting. For all the objectives that you have in mind, we really hope that you achieve them. And in terms of the books that you're working on, keep working on it. We're here and we're looking forward to interviewing you when it is that they are published. But that brings us to the end of our interview at this time. Thank you very much for being here with us, Dexter.
Yes, you're most welcome. And thanks to all the listeners as well.
You've been listening to TLC, Tropical Literature Creators. If you've heard something of interest or something you like, reach out to us. Reach out to our authors. Follow us on social media. We look forward to hearing from you.